All righty. How are we doing, panelists and moderators? Hello, hello.
Great.
Thank you. All righty. Well, if everybody's good to go, we will begin. All right, here we go. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to AMS Weatherband's latest webinar. So you want to go storm chasing, tips and lessons learned with our presenters and panelists all together. It's Amber Liggett, Ashton Robinson Cook, Jennifer Brindley, Chris Jackson, Ian Livingston, and Sean Ernst. Now, before we begin with our webinar proper today, I would like to address some of the guidelines for the webinar for the audience. If you have a question during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We'd like to make sure all the questions are concentrated there and not scattered throughout the chat so that we don't have to hunt for them and we can use our time more efficiently. Questions for speakers submitted through the chat function will not be considered because we're not going to hunt through that for your questions. So make sure Q&A is the one you want to go to if you've got questions you want answered. We will also have some specific time for questions from the audience after the presentation or during the presentation, depending upon the direction the event goes. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce today's presenters. So yes, thank you, Amber and Ashton, for joining us and for serving as moderators for this function. Amber Liggett is a communications analyst for Groundswell Consulting Group, working as a federal contractor, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Climate Program Office. She is also a science writer and public speaker for weather, climate, emergency preparedness, and disaster sciences. Amber obtained her BS in meteorology and MS in emergency management from Millersville University of Pennsylvania. She strives to work in both fields throughout her career. Formerly, Amber was concurrently the Pennsylvania Department of Health Public Information Officer, working in public health emergency preparedness and response communications, and a freelance broadcast meteorologist at the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, ABC affiliate WHTM TV. Amber also incorporates arts into science, technology, engineering, and math through her award-winning business, Amber's Amazing Animal Balloons, which she has been a proud Weather Ready Nation ambassador since 2017. She demonstrates how balloons are an important tool for measuring weather elements while creating weather-themed balloon art and sculptures. And Dr. Ashton Robinson Cook of Little Rock, Arkansas, is kind of serving a hybrid role. He will be a moderator and a presenter for our event today. Dr. Cook was born with a passion for severe and extreme weather. He learned firsthand of the perils of severe weather at a very young age. His family lived in a mobile home that was struck by damaging straight-line winds, possibly a tornado, at the age of 3. This encounter fueled a passion for weather that continues through his career, along with a number of accomplishments, including becoming the first African-American male to earn a PhD from the University of Oklahoma School of Meteorology. His dissertation involved the role of El Niño, La Niña on U.S. tornado outbreaks, and he has since begun work on integrating artificial intelligence and advanced statistical methods for weather prediction. Dr. Cook has also been featured in multiple media outlets and professional organizations, including the American Association of State Climatologists, for his research efforts at extended range weather prediction. He enjoys storm chasing as a hobby, as well as football and travel. And with that being said, Amber and Ashton, I turn the stage over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gideon. So now I'm going to go through the rest of the bios for the other presenters today, starting with Jennifer Brindley. Jennifer Brindley is a professional studio portrait photographer and has been a well-known storm chaser since documenting her first tornado 16 years ago. Jennifer is the documentary photographer on a small tornado research team led by Dr. Anton Simon in field operations over the last 8 years. She has over 15 years experience in documentary photography and is a 13-year partner to Skip Talbot on storm chase pursuits. They have participated in many unique storm chasing related projects, including working as IMAX Film Extreme Weather Support Crew in the TIV and Doghouse chase vehicles. She also was a consultant and art contributor for the 2018 short film Storm Chaser. Jennifer is also renowned for representing gender equality in storm chasing and is frequently sought out by media production companies accordingly. She and her work have been featured in a number of media features, including the recent Netflix documentary series Earthstorm, Cosmopolitan Magazine, Outside Magazine, NPR, Sierra Magazine, many international publications such as The Telegraph and The Observer Magazine, and production companies both nationally and internationally. Next is Chris Jackson. Chasing storms across the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic since 2014, Chris Jackson has been a true weather geek since he was a kid. In February 2014, he began blogging about South Carolina weather on Facebook. And after spending a 15-year career as a firefighter outside of Columbia, South Carolina, he decided to pursue his passion for weather in November 2017. Today, Chris chases tornadoes, hurricanes, and blizzards across the country, and when he isn't chasing storms, he spends his days blogging or working as a meteorologist for the University of South Carolina baseball team. In his spare time, he loves to play golf and is slowly working towards becoming a private instrument-rated pilot. Next is Ian Livingston. Ian Livingston has resided in Washington since early 2006, having moved to the area shortly after finishing college in New England. Living in diverse locations on both coasts and in between, he fostered and developed a lifelong fascination with weather. While on storm chasing vacations in the plains, Ian has witnessed numerous tornadoes and severe storms. Initially drawn to the district by the interest in foreign affairs and politics, gazing skyward and exploring the natural world are his true passions. He has been forecasting for the region with the Washington Post Capital Weather Gig since 2008, where he also covers extreme weather and is the team's go-to data guy. And next and last, we have Sean Ernst. Sean Ernst is a meteorology PhD candidate at the University of Oklahoma, originally from Pepperell, Massachusetts. Sean earned his bachelor's and master's degree in meteorology in 2018 and 2020 at OU as well, with a research focus on extreme weather communication and weather forecast product development. Although his interest in weather has been a lifelong passion, Sean's focus on risk communication developed after watching the May 2013 Moore EF5 tornado on live TV and learning of the chaotic response to the infamous El Reno tornado in Oklahoma City only several days later. Today, Sean is focused on completing his degree and moving into a postdoctoral position at the University of Oklahoma Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis to study National Weather Service products used by partners and the public and develop the next generation of weather forecast communication tools. In his spare time and as weather permits, Sean enjoys storm chasing across the Southern Plains and has maintained a 9-year streak of spotting tornadoes. These include tornadoes in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska, with some notable chases including the May 24th, 2015 Dodge City tornadoes and the April 28th, 2022 Andover tornado, and the May 17th, 2019 McCook, Nebraska tornadoes. Although by no means anything more than a hobbyist, Sean enjoys the art of storm photography and videography, and he's worked to produce several videos for his YouTube page chronicling his chasings. All right, so that is everyone that we have for our panelists today. And before we get into the Q&A, Ashton is going to go through a presentation that is essentially going to outline a paper, an article that we wrote for the AMS Weather Band back in April. So that's something that if you're a Weather Band member, you can access today. And after that, we're going to go ahead and have Q&A with the panelists. So again, if you have questions, especially while Ashton's going through his presentation, this will be a great time to start putting those in the Q&A so we can get to those right away. So Ashton, over to you.
All right, coming along here in just a second. Here we go. All right, I think we're okay. So I put together this presentation just to kind of recap what Amber and I discussed for the Maestros. But before I go too deep into details, I just want to stress that storm chasing is dangerous. It is a very dangerous hobby. Not only are there risks associated with just driving that we, most of us deal with on a daily basis, but there's also distractions. There's, multiple people driving, roads are wet. There may be a tornado off in the distance. There may be a tornado approaching the road you're on. So be careful, do this at your own risk. One of the things we've tried to do here is present a collection of lessons learned and personal anecdotes that have kind of shaped our various philosophies, so to speak, in terms of chasing. So you can glean from those, you can learn, whatever you want. You can do your own storm chasing and build your own philosophies, some of them very wildly, from, conservative to more risky. But just keep this in mind as we move forward, move through. And I'll stop now, actually, and let Amber just kind of address this part of the article. Amber talked about her experience with chasing and why chasing has meant a lot for her. So go ahead, Amber.
Sure, yeah. So my experience with storm chasing really was during my internships that I had in Colorado. So they were both chases that I had were in Eastern Colorado with professionals, the mentors that I had, and I'm grateful for the experience that I got to have to really learn firsthand what it's like to storm chase. That's something I've always been interested in, and having had the classes in mesoscale and synoptic meteorology and learning the actual science behind what a tornado is, how it's developed, and thunderstorms and everything that goes with the cyclogenesis, all the fun weather terms. It's like, okay, now I want to put that into practice, actually get out in the field and see it for myself. So having that background was helpful, but there's really nothing like experiencing a tornado firsthand. And so the picture that you see was actually from a chase that I did in 2018, again in Eastern Colorado. So those are a couple of land spouts. And really the biggest difference between a tornado and a land spout is that the land spout really does kind of start from the ground up. And so we do have a couple of those that I saw at the same time. There were some other ones, but that was one of the best pictures that I got. Now, during the 2018 chase, I chased in 2016 and 2018. During the 2018 chase was a little bit different because at a certain point, the person who I was with, one of my roommates, we separated from the professionals who we were with because we were going to be heading back to where our internship was. And so at a certain point, we didn't have cell data. And we're trying to get back to the main highway, I-70. And it was a bit of a struggle. But the good part was the roads were gridded. And so that helped. I was able to just pull up, Apple Maps. And even though I couldn't actually put a location in, I was able to navigate us back to I-70. So that's one thing I learned, was that you can lose cell data. So have a plan, have backup map, a paper map. And what's nice about the plains is there are a lot of gridded roads, so that's helpful as well. You also want to make sure you have water, snacks, other electronics. When I went chasing the first time in 2016, the mentor that I was with, they had laptop in the car and they were able to pull up radar on there, and they had that cellular data in their car. So they didn't have to worry about losing any kind of Wi-Fi. And then again, having that knowledge of the meteorology is very helpful. So that's the quick synopsis. And again, there's more in the article, and I'll put the link of the article in the chat here while Ashton continues.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber. So we already talked about the event that got me in the weather at the tender age of 3 years old, but here's another event that I had a really close encounter with. This is the parent supercell for a violent tornado. And notice the couplet here in relation to where I used to live. I used to live at the red dot in each of these screen captures. So as you can see, this meso passed just barely to the south of me. And I remember being at home with my mom. As this meso passed to our south, the screen door was yanked out of her hand. Of course, the power is out, and we hear the sirens, but we don't exactly know what's happening right then. There's a wall of trees around my neighborhood, so it's hard to see for long distances. But then the wind just shut off all of a sudden. And my mom looks at me and she says, I think there was a tornado. So the next day we decided to drive south, and just 5 minutes down the road, there's stuff everywhere. And this was and as I recall it, my first interaction with a subvortex within a main path, because there were spots along the path where trees were pointing all in one direction or toward one point within the ambient path of damage. So it's just a fascinating situation. And again, I couldn't get enough back then. I watched the Weather Channel all the time. But the storm chasing part of this was really interesting because all throughout my childhood, I'd heard about storms, I follow radar, but I wasn't able to kind of actually get the visual to actually see what the stuff looks like in person. And so moving to Oklahoma kind of meant more visuals of storms that I'd only been able to look at radar and maybe satellite beforehand. So that really enhanced my understanding of atmospheric convection. And in this particular case, there's this narrow, very strong updraft with rotors that are actually on the side of the updraft because there were 7,000 cape that this storm was embedded in. But then there's also these bands that are kind of streaming into the main updraft, and the main updraft was actually spinning as it was rotating toward us. So clearly this was a rotating supercell, and because there's not a lot of precipitation around it, it's actually an LP that would eventually transition to classic later. But we can make out all these features. It's one of the best photos I think I've ever seen of a rotating updraft. And here's the actual confirmation of that from radar. So again, I'm relating what I see in person to what I see on radar and making those two comparisons in real time to actually navigate the storm. So there's a hook, there's rotation. You can see the red versus the green there, which is right next to each other as cyclonic rotation. And that fits the diagram that you've probably seen in all of the texts in the textbooks that describe the supercell and its general structure. But now I'm able to see that in real time and also see variations of it in real time, because as you chase enough of these storms, you notice things like some of these have a gust front that's actually undercutting the meso. Sometimes there's low-level strata streaming right into the mesocyclone. Sometimes there could be multiple tornadoes along a flanking line, in addition to a main tornado right beneath the mesocyclone. So for me, it's just fascinating. And that's why I enjoy storm chasing. It is a bit of a rush, but it's a good time. And I always learn a lot when I go. In the article, we talked a little bit about the science of a good chase day. And I showed this image basically to try to help describe that this is the reason why the Great Plains in general, even though severe thunderstorms happen all over the country, the Great Plains is the most favorite area for tornadoes on Earth, because the Great Plains is often co-located with or just upstream of the Gulf of Mexico. So often these warm moist air masses can come in and fuel storms. And they're also downstream of what we call an elevated mixed layer or dry air aloft that's also unstable, but aloft. And so what happens is a big system can sometimes come up, or maybe just a subtle impulse can help get storms to actually go through that elevated mixed layer and then evolve into these big, monsters that we know of as supercells. But I want to kind of reiterate here, though, is that the severe thunderstorms happen pretty often, but there's a more specific set of circumstances or environmental conditions that actually help support supercell development. A supercell is simply just a storm that has rotation. The supercells are often reliant on vertical wind shear, but that vertical wind shear can be concentrated in different layers of the atmosphere. Sometimes the vertical wind shear is lowest in the lowest 3 kilometer or lowest 1 kilometer of the atmosphere, and that can be an indicator that maybe storms will have more of a propensity to rotate, as opposed to maybe shear through a deeper layer, like maybe 6 kilometers up in altitude above the ground. Sometimes these cells rely on favorable interactions with surface boundaries. This is kind of a technical term, but we often look at vorticity along horizontal boundaries that supercells can actually ride along and ingest into their updrafts to help them rotate. So that's something I kind of key on whenever I'm out chasing. But often supercells are the more prolific tornado producers. Sometimes they're embedded in lines and they can make them shorter lived, but most of the times it's those isolated supercells with nothing around it to kind of disrupt the inflow or the rear flank or cause this complex of, rear flank or forward flank to gust out and undercut the tornado, these isolated cells have the better chance most times of producing prolific tornadoes. There's a few additional considerations. One's environmental, and then a couple of just kind of related to, logistics of chasing. But sometimes we get, we're expecting these big outbreaks to happen, but there may not be enough shear in the lower levels to actually help the storms to organize in the lower levels and get that rotation to organize close to the ground. There have been times when I've forecasted actually in the past where there was too much lift and there were too many storms, and all of their outflows collided with each other, and it made it difficult for a dominant supercell to persist for a long period of time and produce, longer lived tornadoes. And then there's also characteristics of low-level boundaries, as I kind of hit on in the previous slide. Sometimes these low-level boundaries can surge out beneath the thunderstorm, and if there's any kind of rotation, that rotation will be undercut, and that makes it less likely, not impossible, but less likely to actually get a tornado at the surface. But then also just, again, logistics, is it worth it to go from Norman, Oklahoma to Iowa to have a low chance of a tornado on a particular day? Is there a chance that I might clear air bust? I don't want to go to Iowa for that necessarily, or Missouri, or, I can stay at home and clear air bust. Why do I have to go all the way that far? So that's something to kind of keep in mind too, especially have to be back at work the next day, you're not on vacation or anything. Those are limitations, I think, sometimes that chasers can kind of face. Then there's also a big one that may come up today in conversation, chaser convergence. Oftentimes on the big days, especially when I lived in Oklahoma, the big days brought out chasers from all over the place. And oftentimes a lot of people will focus on one area where the greatest risk of a tornado would be, but are there secondary or tertiary threats that might have emerged that may keep you away from so many chasers and allow you to have a little bit more of a pleasant experience kind of out by yourself with the storm? And that's kind of what happened for us with the Boulder to Castle cell that I just showed. And sometimes what I've even done is just waited until the storm is formed and then drove right to the storm, as opposed to, going out to a target area and then trying to figure out where storms are going to initiate. So there's ways to go about that that I've learned over the years. There are several dangers that we discussed in the article. There's handoffs, and in the interest of time, I won't go too deep into all of these different concepts, but if there's questions about it, we can kind of address those and talk about them. But there's handoffs where essentially one tornado weakens and another tornado forms right in the same vicinity, maybe off just a little bit to the east, southeast, northeast. Sometimes storms can exhibit unusual behavior in volatile environments with extreme instability. And unfortunately, we saw that in the El Reno tornado of 2013, where we lost some chasers. That mesocyclone sped up and then turned, and also over doubled in size in a very short amount of time, about maybe 30 seconds to a minute. And it was already large before it doubled in size. So it became a really problematic situation for a lot of people, and people were trapped in that. There's also issues with rain-wrapped tornadoes. Rain can limit your visibility. So that's also something to kind of keep in mind. Wet, muddy roads, hydroplaning, getting stuck on a muddy road if it's rained recently, which happens a lot around supercells. There's also debris that could be on the road if you cross a tornado path, a freshly damaged area. There can be nails on the road, there can be parts of homes, there can be parts of trees. There's a lot of different hazards that come up with that type of chasing right in the immediate aftermath of the damage. Night chasing, again, that hinders your visibility. In my mind, I would think radar might be a must, but it's just a really tricky thing to do at night. You have to be really careful. And then there's distracted driving. There's more cell phones. There's, perhaps a big tornado off to your west, and you're trying to stay ahead of it while navigating, other cars, other chasers, pulling in radar data, pulling in meso analysis, pulling in weather data of all kinds. There's a lot of potential hazard there. And so we stressed that in the article. And then I don't think I'll have time. Let's see, I don't think I'll have time to really go too deep into this, but there's one example of an occlusion that some newscasters were actually filming. Fascinating video, but they were in an incredibly dangerous spot. And thankfully, the storm of interest turned to the left after it got past their position so that they missed the worst of it. But a very fascinating video, and I'll actually post that in the link so everyone can see. And then that's all I have. My Twitter handle is ARCook75. So feel free to reach out to me to continue the discourse that we have today. And now I will pass it back to Amber so we can now get the conversation going with the rest of our panelists.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so, one moment. We're gonna. So sorry. My dog wants to join the conversation. So our first question, as we're looking here in the Q&A section, is from Craig Cece. How do you communicate tornado chasing safety? I know there are a lot of amateurs out there that don't take the same care that you all take. So as you all go ahead and answer this question, I know that there's lots of other visuals that we have here too. So feel free to share your visuals as they relate to the questions. And whoever wants to start, feel free to go ahead.
I'll jump in. I'm very passionate about storm chasing safety. Having Skip Talbot for a chase partner, also the two of us kind of hone in on all of that. And I think it's important to communicate chasing safety all the time in everything we do, making sure that it's at the forefront of our minds and our decision making every time we go out on the road, when we're talking about how we're approaching the storms that we chase and what our MO is. And then I think sharing that safety information is also really valuable. There is a really great YouTube video that Skip made called Storm Spotting Secrets, and there's another one called Lessons from El Reno. Ashton had mentioned El Reno and the unusual nature of the highly volatile environment and the way the supercell and the tornado acted in that environment. So there's a lot we can learn from it. And I think sharing, and being vocal and upfront about our experiences, and also sharing the lessons that we've learned as storm chasers is the best way to help educate the younger chasers who are coming around and really excited about an up close and personal tornado experience.
Thanks, Chris. What do you have to say for that one?
Just going off what Jennifer said, really understanding what your limitations, your skill sets are, and recognizing that and keeping your head on a swivel at all times, because it's so easy to get tunnel vision, especially when you get around storms that might be severe, might be getting ready to produce a tornado, or do have a tornado that's reported on the ground in progress, doing damage, all that kind of stuff. It's really easy to get sucked into that really narrow field of vision and lose sight of what's going on around you. And with storm chasing, I think one of the biggest risks, hands down, is the driving aspect of it, because not only do you have to deal with the actual storm that you're trying to find, you have to deal with the regular folks that's using the roads. You have to deal with other chasers that might just decide to pull off the road at the last second, or maybe standing in the road. I know that's kind of something that just gets me from my experience as a firefighter. Anytime you're around the road, you never want to turn your back to traffic. That's just kind of like my creed. But that's one of the biggest things, is just being able to understand where you are and keep your head on a swivel. Just understand what the environment is doing around you at all times.
Sean, would you like to go next?
Sure. I can add in a little bit. First of all, I want to second everything that Jen said about especially watching those safety videos and stuff like that. I think I can't recommend Skip's videos enough. I remember in undergrad, in my first years chasing, watching those and just, having my mind blown about all the great stuff that was in those. So highly recommend. But from my social science background, something I can talk about here is there's an idea, and this is specifically about the sort of challenges of communicating tornado chasing safety, especially to amateurs, is there's a concept called the tragedy of the commons. And it's this idea that we all sort of are interacting in this shared space, this common, which is the area around a storm. The problem is that you as an individual are making decisions based on sort of your goals, and that might be getting close to the tornado or getting ahead of the tornado or using a dirt road or something like that. And the problem is that acting in a way that is potentially detrimental to the people around you, like setting up your tripod in the middle of the road, or driving too fast, or skipping or passing on a double yellow line, all these things may have extra benefits for you as an individual. You might get closer to the storm. You might get a better position. You might get a better time lapse with that nice stable road surface. But you are increasing the danger to everyone else. You are ruining the commons. But, you know, if it's just you, you're just the only one doing it. It's probably fine, right? You know, somebody will go around. It won't be a problem. The problem of the tragedy of the commons is that each of us as individual actors see that, and then we start doing those antisocial behaviors as well. So then all of a sudden everyone's passing in the yellow, double yellow. Everyone's putting up their tripods in the middle of the road. Everybody's pursuing these dangerous acts. So one of the things that I think is really important to think about when it comes to chase safety, and something we can talk about, is that it is crucial that all of us are trying to follow these safe behaviors and follow these safe tenets. Yes, that might mean that you might miss out on an advantageous position once in a while. But if we aren't all taking storm chasing safety seriously, we're all going to suffer for it. And we're all going to have more dangerous chases, and we're going to miss more tornadoes because of traffic jams, because of accidents, or people standing in the road, or stuff like that.
Thanks, Sean. And Ian, go ahead.
I should know better than to come after Sean, because there's no way I'm going to sound that smart. But I think, sort of bouncing off of what he just said, a big part of this comes down to the fact that these days a lot of storm chasers are in competition with each other, whether they'll admit it or not. I think in a lot of senses, we're not going to solve many of the issues without addressing that part. And some of it might be the tragedy of the commons, of social media pushing people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do, that kind of thing. And then just briefly, if I added my own sort of safety thought, it would sort of be along the lines that, you know, not all risks are created equal. If you have a moderate risk in, you know, Western Kansas in June, it's going to probably be a lot more comfortable of a chase than a moderate risk in Southern Louisiana in, you know, February, March, something like that. And again, it goes back, I think, to the competition these days. You sort of see people flock to the moderate risk, no matter where it is, without necessarily thinking of, you know, what could happen, not only to them, but again, everybody else that's around them that can sort of put them in a bad position.
All righty, I'll take on the next question. It's probably going to be a combination of maybe a couple of questions here. Preston Bradley asks, advice for anyone who wants to chase solo, especially in an area like the Mississippi Delta and the Arkansas Delta. And then another question from Marcella Liggett. Do you recommend always chasing with a partner?
I'll take that one if nobody else wants to. I heard something about Southeast, so close enough. But me personally, I like to chase with somebody if I can, but if not, I change my expectations. I change what I'm willing to do, especially when I get in the near storm environment in the Southeast, because, you know, you got a road network that's not beneficial to you. You have terrain that's not beneficial. You have trees everywhere. Everything's just stacking up against you. So you look at the risk reward, and if I'm by myself, I'm not going to maybe be as eager to get a little bit closer to the storm as if I got someone else that I trust with me, that we've chased storms before and we understand what each other's abilities are, and we're not, we're looking out for one another, and also what the storm's doing, trying to get a different perspective on things. But as far as the Mississippi Delta and the Arkansas Delta, that's some of the best chase terrain outside of Western Kansas, in my opinion. All of us from the Southeast, we call it the Kansas of the East, because it's just so flat out there. And you got a pretty decent road network in spots. But the one thing that usually ends up hampering everybody is the Mississippi River crossing. Once you get outside of Memphis and you start going down south toward Tunica, you don't have another Mississippi River crossing until you get to Greenville, which is about 2.5 hours south of Memphis. So you got to really play your cards right. And that dives into Dixie Alley, and I guess in a nutshell. You have to really, really play chess with the storms and decide where you want to intercept them, because more than likely they're going to be moving at 60 knots or 50 to 60 knots, and you only got one or two tries and that's it. So it's a chess game.
And I'll interject as someone who's actually chased solo at night. Certainly there's an element of danger with that, because obviously we know these storms do handoffs. They can sometimes take deviant motion from the main wind aloft or even from the parent cell itself. So one of the things I was careful to do was actually have someone remote to kind of help me process radar. And I also had radar on board, so I would take stops to just kind of make sure I wasn't getting myself in any trouble. And I stayed way behind the storm. So while I wasn't able to necessarily see the tornado in this case, what I did see was the parent supercell, and also stand in the inflow of a tornadic supercell with lightning flashes lighting up the base of the meso that was rapidly rotating. And it was just an incredible sight to see. There's nothing quite like it that I've ever seen. I've been in the vicinity of some cells at night with strong rotation like that. And I stayed pretty far away enough that, I ended up seeing a tornado a little bit later. But it was as I felt like I was in a safe enough distance to actually kind of spot off in the distance as opposed to following too close. The other thing too about that storm is that it was only moving about 20 or 25. So it wasn't a very fast moving storm. I had radar. I had someone kind of looking at from a distance and calling and relaying information, so in a sense, I wasn't alone, even though I was there kind of by myself watching the supercell. So I'll pass it along to someone else who wants to address that question next. Jennifer.
I'm happy to jump in. There are a handful of really amazing solo chasers, like a Melanie Metz or a Hank Shima, who have strong instincts and a lot of experience. But the truth is that for the rest of us mere mortals, that's a lot to manage and balance in a storm chase. It's roads, traffic, other drivers, which is like the scariest part of storm chasing, plus the radar, plus video, photo, and all of that's going on, plus your adrenaline. So I always like to say, two people is better than one. Two brains, two sets of eyes, two sets of hands. You're going to increase your likelihood of success and safe chasing by a lot if you have someone with you. Even if they're not experienced, they can help you in a lot of ways. If you decide to chase solo, I would say the most important thing, like Ashton was mentioning, is to give the storm some breathing room. Don't get too close, give yourself space, and also just regularly stop, analyze the direction of the storm and the tornado producing region of the storm. Make sure you've got your escape routes down. And if you're ever unsure of what you're doing, if you ever lose your situational awareness, just stop, execute your escape route. There will always be another storm. There's only one of you.
I would just
I'm sorry.
briefly, I would just briefly second, if you can have a partner, it's probably usually a good idea. I've actually never gone tornado chasing alone. I think I've maybe gone to look at thunderstorms, lightning alone. I don't need a friend for that. But I've had a question here and there from various chasers over the years. Like, I guess we had a fair amount of luck for a stretch when we went out, considering we go out for 2 weeks a year. And it's been a couple of years now, but we managed to see some big tornadoes most years. And I think a big part of that is the fact that I was with 2 other people every other time. There's just so much that you gain from being a group. You have one person that's really good at driving in bad weather, one person that's really good at analyzing radar, and then me in the back seat like trolling Twitter. So it's a pretty good trade-off, I think, for everyone involved there. So I'm definitely pro group if you can find one.
I definitely want to third all of that sentiment. It's all of my very worst storm chases where I've missed the tornado, I've been out of position, I've been in places I really shouldn't have been when I'm trying to do everything or if I'm by myself. It is just so much better to divide and conquer on these tasks. I can guarantee you that like Jennifer said, us mere mortals have to work together to see some incredible stuff. So a great example of that is just this year in May, my family was down for graduation, and my dad is a software programmer and a former Air Force pilot, but he has no tornado chasing experience. It was just me and him in the car. He drove. He's got a lot of experience driving. I did the navigating, and we got his first tornado easy as pie. It was only 5 miles away from my house, which of course was the most exciting thing about all that. But I don't think I could have done that positioning by myself, trying to drive and look at radar and do all the other things that you want to do when you're storm chasing. So highly recommend having a partner, especially when you're considering chasing, like Ashton was talking about, at night or in other dangerous circumstances. Because another thing that this kind of gets into the safety idea, but making sure you think about the fact that all of the worst storm chasing accidents, things like crashes on the road, road accidents, getting hit by tornadoes, are never something that occur in isolation. It doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a series of decisions that are made that slowly tick up the risk that you're putting yourself at. And one of the decisions that really jumps that risk level is chasing by yourself, because you're having that overwhelming amount of information and things that you need to do. And that is going to reduce your ability to make quick decisions and to keep yourself out of harm's way. So for multiple reasons, I cannot recommend chasing with someone else enough.
Christy, if you have anything to add, I'll pass it on to you, or if not, I have another comment and we have to go into the next question.
Yeah, I've got something, but it's going to take me a second. I was actually trying to download the radar data. If you have a chance, I'm a real big advocate for the GR programs. Whether it's analyst or GR level 3. That way you can get full tilt of the radar. I had it happen to be in October 20. What day was that? I was just looking. October 29, 2021, outside of Clear, Alabama at night. Me and Brett were chasing a severe thunderstorm that was just popping positive lightning like I've never seen in my life before. We almost got struck twice in the car just driving down the road by lightning in a period of about 3 minutes. But what radar scope failed to show on the 4 tilts of radar scope was the full picture of the storm from a volume scan. And above us, above that rate where radar scope would not reach the storm, you could absolutely see every telltale sign that it was about to drop a tornado. And sure enough, about 4 minutes later, it did. But when I say there was a lot of lightning, here we go. I will show you what a lot of lightning looks like. That was one. And then not 30 seconds later, right here.
Whoa.
Just it lit up a big oak tree right beside us. And then right after that, of course, had a tornado and all that stuff. But yeah, just little clues like that. And it's, like I said, I'm big on the GR programs, just to be able to have the full use of every product available from the radar.
Yep. One last thing I'll add to before we pass to the next question. When I made the decision to chase at night, it was one of those things where I was already out chasing, and it carried over into the night, and I felt safe enough that I didn't want to stop. I wouldn't necessarily initiate a chase starting at like maybe 1 a.m. I don't know if I've ever done it before. But the other thing too, to add though to that is I also don't think I would have chased if there were other storms around to obscure my view of the main system of interest. And in this particular case that I was looking at, I think it's Dallas Garland in 2015, right around Christmas time, actually. I was on the storm and I saw the storm coming up from the southwest, and I let it get northeast of me to let the foreflank and the lightning in the foreflank kind of backlight whatever was happening between me and the foreflank, that being the mezzo, and what ended up being a handoff actually occurring right in that too. But if it's raining where I am, it's a whole lot harder to see to the northeast. And that would have probably led to just calling the chase altogether. So it's one of those situations where I didn't plan on it happening, but it worked out. So, okay, go ahead, Amber.
Thank you all. That was really interesting and informative. I know both times I chased, I was with groups of people. So I would feel more comfortable with that because I am not as professional in it. And so I also would recommend that. And I think this next question is great for those who are starting out chasing, maybe brand new to it or still in the beginning stages. And that is, how do you start out a tornado chase? What are you traveling to? What are you looking for on radar to head to? So, Ian, let's start with you on this one.
Well, I was gonna first say don't, well, my advice for a first time chaser would be something like don't just bullseye chase the storm prediction forecast. Although honestly, my answer to this question would probably to be to bullseye chase the SPC forecast. If it's your first time out and you don't know what you're doing, they're pretty good at it. Again, you sort of want to consider not chasing in the bayous or something. I think it's important to have a general sense of what you're doing, what you're looking at. That helps not only you as a chaser, but it helps those who will get the reports to help them with the warnings and whatnot. And of course, everyone should have fairly easy access to a local spotter program through the National Weather Service. There's a bunch of great online tutorials, things you can find these days, just about anything. I know when I was a kid, I used to have to like print out chase logs and put them in folders and stuff. But these days, I know, that's probably something Jennifer would know more about too with the Girls Who Chase. I know they sort of have their program to teach people as well. So I think, all you really need is a little bit of knowledge and a cell phone these days. You can get more advanced, but that's going to be enough to get you what you want.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that since he mentioned Girls Who Chase. Girls Who Chase is not just for girls. I'll just say that right away. It is a really phenomenal resource for storm chasing and learning how to storm chase if you're interested. Every spring there is a spring training program, panels with experts, classes, all kinds of really cool stuff. So definitely start with your storm spotter certification. You can check out the Girls Who Chase spring training program. Also storm spotting secrets on Skip Talbot's channel, but also before you jump out by yourself, go chasing with someone. You can do a tour, which is a really great way. There are a lot of great tours out there that educate you. The College of DuPage is a great one out of Illinois. They'll teach you hand maps, forecasting, how to storm chase, what parts of the storm do what. It's such a better idea to have a bit more of a foundation to work off of than jumping in blindly. So those would be my recommendations.
I can sort of add in as well. I think storm chasing, like any other hobby or skill or thing you're going to do in life, it's as much as we'd like to, like Jennifer said, just jump right in. This is something that takes skill and knowledge to do well and to do safety. So my advice is to second Ian and Jennifer and say that educate yourself before you do anything. Even if you go on a tour, watch some videos. Like one of my favorite things that I learned from how to just navigate around storms was, again, we're going to go back to Skip Talbot, but his video on storm spotting secrets. And it talks about how you can look for the inflow horseshoe is what it's sort of colloquially known as, but it's this area of the storm that's kind of at the leading edge of that hook echo that you see, that the little nub of the hook that can tell you, once you spot where that is, you can orient yourself to where you are in the storm. You can know where the tornado is going to happen. This is really important information that's going to both get you the best view of the storm, and it's going to keep you safe from all of the threats that are involved in that storm. So that's why you want to make sure you do that education for yourself before you go out there and storm chase. It's not something you learn by doing necessarily. It's definitely something you learn by learning first and then do. The other thing, just to sort of get a little more into the mechanics of storm chasing, is there's this sort of concept in forecasting. It's this thing called the forecast funnel. This is something I learned in undergrad and sort of got to play around with more in masters, but it's this idea that we sort of take a broad look at the meteorology and then sort of narrow down with time as we get more detailed data. So you can look at something like upper air charts, or you can look at your general sort of observations across the surface. And you can get a general idea where the ingredients that you need for these supercell thunderstorms are going to come together, which are, you can use this acronym called SLIM, which is shear, lift, instability, and moisture. And when you get those four things together, good things happen. Well, if you want to see tornadoes, at least. Once you sort of find that location, this is how we get past that SPC bullseye sort of forecasting that Ian was talking about. You then can look at those sort of surface observations. Maybe there's a boundary in that area. Maybe there's a little bit of moisture increasing in a smaller area, and that can sort of narrow down where you think you want to go. You can look at satellite observations to see where clouds are starting to bubble up and maybe form into a larger updraft and potentially a thunderstorm. And then you can use that radar once storms have formed and have start to put out rain to really hone in on where you need to go and where you need to be in relation to that storm to see the tornado. So that's kind of the meteorological side of sort of how do you pick your place you're going to go, and then how do you go from there? You sort of take that broad view and then you narrow it down with time and data.
I guess I'll piggyback off what everybody else has said. Of course, the education part's the most important, understanding what you're looking at, knowing what you're seeing. But also, I think something else that's important is, I guess establishing your own, what is your mission? What is your goals? What do you want to get out of it? Some people want to see a tornado up close. Some people want to see a tornado from a distance. Some people just like shooting pictures of the entire storm from 25 miles away. And that's all perfectly fine. But I think it's really important to understand, what you want to get out of it. And go into something with the mindset of this is the goal. Today I want to be able to photograph a supercell. Work on that. Photograph the supercell. Then if you have a natural progression to where you want to get close up to see a wall cloud, there you go. Let's start working toward a wall cloud. Just having a natural progression and not coming out of the gate just saying I'm going to go and get a quarter of a mile from a EF4 wedge tornado. I think would be pretty foolish for anybody. But I really advocate for the education side of it and the natural progression and knowing what you want to get out of it and not cave into what anybody else wants to, maybe say, why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that? It's your tornado chase. I mean, nobody's making you be there. You're doing it for fun. So enjoy it. Do it on your own accord.
I didn't say it myself.
Go ahead, Ian.
I didn't say it myself, but I just wanted to jump back in quick to definitely agree with everyone that said to go with people that have done it before, especially on your first trip. The first year we went chase cationing, I mostly go with a local meteorologist, but the first year we went out with a guy who had been storm chasing in the plains for about 10 years already. And I think that was huge. Without it, we wouldn't have known what to expect. We wouldn't have known about the parts that suck a lot. We wouldn't have, known all the various tricks, known the cool people to talk to. I think, in the past, one of the great things that you hear these old time chasers talk about is just these like gatherings on the side of the road with like the biggest experts of the time talking about what's going on in the storm. And it might not be quite the same now, but you still run into huge groups of people that you can nerd out with all the time. So it's pretty awesome in that sense.
I also wanted to double up on Chris's comment about knowing what you want, because as another sort of pro tip, besides all the safety stuff we've been talking about, you'll have a lot more fun on your storm chases if you don't go out expecting a big EF4 wedge that you're going to get within that quarter mile of every single time you go out. I just went out to the Oklahoma Panhandle yesterday, and I looked at the forecast, and the models were kind of poo-pooing tornado chances, but based on biases that they've had recently, I was thinking the chances might be a little higher. So I told myself I'm going to go drive 5 hours today because I think I'm going to see a really nice supercell. I didn't say I'm going to see a tornado. I said supercell because, in fact, we didn't see much more than a brief little dusty spin up, but we saw this gorgeous sculpted supercell. And so the whole drive back, I'm just thinking about how great this chase was and how it met my expectations and was a good time. And if you set your expectations correctly, that will happen a lot more often.
Amber, is it your time for a question or is it me?
It's back to you.
All right. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and we're a little low on time. So I'll go ahead and just position to this next question about safe positioning, which is kind of in line with what we've just been talking about here recently. So is there a safe positioning to place yourself relative to the storm where you have a good view but aren't so susceptible to danger, i.e. always southeast?
I'll jump in and say no. Just the last month or two, anywhere in the southeast has proven that, with this persistent ridge over the south central part of the country, and you get the ring of fire with the northwest flow coming over especially the mountains into the Carolinas, and you get southeasterly storm motions. Yeah, I wouldn't say all the time southeasterly is good, but understanding the storm setup of the day, going back to the education part, knowing how to expect the storm motions. I'm a big proponent of Cameron Nixon and everything that he's done with photographs and being able to understand storm relative motion, expectation of tornado deviant motion using photographs, stuff like that. And on the education side will make you a much better chaser, and you'll start to understand the science of it more. And I think you'll enjoy it more as well.
Okay, who's next?
I might just jump in really quick and maybe scoop Jennifer on this one, but I would once again recommend Skip Talbot's videos. He has some really good chase log videos where he talks about how he positioned himself, and I believe Jennifer was with him on several of those chases. But how to position yourself safely around storms, because like Chris said, you can't use a compass rose. These things move in all directions depending on the conditions around. And what's more is you can't use the radar picture either, because that classic supercell that Ashton showed in the presentation is what 50% of supercells generously look like. You're going to have supercells embedded in lines. You're going to have supercells completely surrounded by precipitation. You're going to have all manner of nonsense because nature doesn't like to fit into the boxes that we like to make for it. So definitely sort of that knowledge of structure and radar analysis is what you need to make sure that you're safe. But in general, if I had to sort of do the, one size fits all approach, if you have your supercell, it kind of looks like this with a little hook echo here, usually somewhere in this area, if the storm is moving this way, is probably where I would set up if you are a little bit newer to chasing. If you know what you're doing and you have good road options, up here you can get a really good view of the tornado a lot of the time, but you don't want to stay there.
Right.
I would just briefly say, I don't have as much experience as some people, but I've seen a lot of really cool tornadoes in great visibility without being in the bear's cage or that sort of last location that Sean was just pointing to. I think there's plenty of people that know how to chase and can do it relatively safely. I don't know if they're safe. There's basically different levels of risk and what kind of risk you're willing to take. I think one big key though is sort of the terrain and the road network. A key example there is 2016 May 24. You had Dodge City flat, no trees, gridded roads. May 25, you had Chapman going through they're not big valleys, but for Kansas, they're river valleys, bad roads, that kind of thing. So, in Dodge City, we got close. Chapman, we stayed back.
Yeah, okay, it looks like Ian was cutting out just a little bit there. So yeah, I'll just piggyback a little bit. Roads are the big thing, but I think chasers seem to continue to struggle with not escaping across the tornado's path. And I loved what Chris said to the question, is there a safe place you can always be? No, straight up no. And you never make assumptions about what the storm or the tornado producing area of the storm or the tornado itself are going to do. So really, you just have to continually repeat the same method over and over when you're chasing. Stop. Analyze the direction of the storm and the tornado producing region of the storm and ensure that the route you're taking to keep up with the storm or your escape route will take you directly away from the tornado rather than crossing the path of the tornado. And then repeat that every single time you stop to watch the storm. So that's the thing about chasing safely, is that you have to constantly make micro adjustments to your position based on the relativity to how the storm and the tornado is moving. It's never going to be constant. It's always going to change. You look up historically tornado paths. They don't just all go in a straight line. Like that deviant motion that keeps being mentioned, the way that tornadoes occlude when they finish or after they get stronger. There are all kinds of things that you can't expect. So just maintaining the situational awareness and readjusting your approach is really the only way to do it, in my opinion.
I'll add one quick thing. I do a lot of forecasting, and one of the things that's really tricky about it is that not every situation is exactly the same. And that's the fascinating part of weather. If it were exactly the same every time, we could predict it really well, but there's times when we don't. And one of the things that comes to my mind is Gerald, Texas in '97. That was a really anomalous system. I believe that storm was actually moving to the southwest and was an F5, and it was doing a lot of damage and killing people. The thing about that one, though, is that it was highly visible. But there were still fatalities. It was just that strong of a storm, and it just hit several structures. But what happens if you have an anomalous system that's actually rain wrapped? That could theoretically happen too, and perhaps some of that might have been even the case with El Reno. There was a lot of rain around in El Reno 2013. So every situation is different, and maintaining a situational awareness and understanding where the areas of threat are in relation to a storm is probably the first step to really just staying safe in the vicinity. And if you ever get in a situation where you don't feel like you're safe, it's time to get out and have your escape plan ready.
Yeah, Ashton, if I'm just jump on that real quick, like one tip that I would give people is like when you get a tornadic supercell that's got an established tornado with it, and especially if you have another cell that gets in the very close proximity of it that also is rotating or has a tornado with it, when that starts to happen, almost all bets are off with storm motions. I learned that firsthand on April 13th, 2020. I was chasing the EF3 tornado and the big outbreak in the Carolinas we had over here, and I was right behind in the EF3, and there's two storms merged with two EF3s in concert that Fujiwara around one another. One of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. And unfortunately, there was fatalities and stuff like that. But that morning really taught me a lot about the near storm environment when you start getting other storms that impede on a ongoing storm.
Mm-hmm. The storm interactions are so tricky because sometimes the interactions are destructive, and sometimes it just doesn't even matter. And the El Reno 2011 tornado was like that. There were cells moving in from the south and moving into that meso, and it just didn't matter. That was a strong meso that was just gonna do its thing. But the ones to the south, the two cells to the south that were also producing high-end tornadoes were affected by the precip from the cells immediately to the south of each respective cell. So there's a lot we know, but there's also a lot that we're learning too in this field. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, an example of that would be that supercell that went through the south side of Oklahoma City 2 months ago, produced 12, 13, or 15 tornadoes, something unworldly. Yeah.
Well, looking at time, we have time for one more question. And as I'm scrolling through, we have been answering some of these in chat, and some of them are answered through the article as well. So feel free to go back and catch that. But for the last question, I'm going to pull two out that are about photography. So do you have better luck with video or photography? Do you have any tips? And also, when should one need to stop outdoor photo shooting and sit in the car to avoid lightning?
Jennifer, I'll let you take that first. You know you want that.
Well, photo or video, I think it depends on what you mean by better luck. It might just be more what you're drawn to. There's merit and beauty in both. So maybe play around, rent some cameras, see what you like, borrow some from other people, just play. You can get really beautiful stills off of high quality video. I'm not the video guy, I'm the photography person. As far as lightning, generally speaking, as soon as the storm starts spitting out anvil bolts that are cloud to ground, that's when I start to just I just jump in the car right away. So if you're seeing the lightning in the scene that's out there, like miles away from you, you're going to be fine. As soon as you start seeing them to your left and to your right and a little closer, that's when you want to jump right in the car. So.
I'll jump in here. Following up what she said, I do more video now than I do stills. When I first started out, I got a Canon 5D Mark IV, and I was taking stills all the time. But when I would get done, I'd be like, man, I wish I had some videos. That'd be really nice, and just really crisp video. So now I have a Sony that I'm using for video, and the Canon's kind of like the child that's neglected, poor guy. But one thing that I think is really interesting, especially for folks like me down in the Southeast, anywhere east of Mississippi and south of the Ohio River, is I guess the technology of drones, because drones offer you a aerial perspective that makes, it doesn't matter where you are, you can get a perspective like you're in Western Kansas. I can just get up over the trees and over the terrain, and you can really see. And that's been one of the biggest things I know for me and all the guys that I guess here regionally that chase. Drones have been amazing, nothing short of amazing. Being able to see what a storm's doing, see it coming, and not all the time are you going to see a tornado, especially in the Southeast. Most times it's going to be a wall of water, and there's a tornado lurking in there. So, but the drone not only offers this fantastic photo and video opportunity with what we have on the market today, but also a safety opportunity, and that's something I think a lot of people should put some credence to when you're thinking about purchasing something like that.
And another vote for having a chase partner, because one person can do one and the other can do the other, then you just don't have to worry about it. Another option is to set it, forget it. So if you have a dash mounted camera, you can just point it in the direction of the storm, and then it's recording, and then you can play with your still camera and see, different compositions, different lenses and things like that. So there are some options.
I can piggyback on that, and the ultimate set it and forget it, which, speaking of my footage from yesterday that I have to look at today after this talk, is I was on this incredible lightning show in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and I just took my 360 GoPro and I just slapped that on top of the car, and we forget about it. And sometimes I forget about it a little too long, and it's like 3 hours later, and I'm like, ooh, that's on the roof still. I should probably get that. But sort of from an amateur perspective, I can still remember sort of getting into this stuff when I was, a freshman in college. The most important things to remember are that almost any camera nowadays, even your cell phone camera, can take phenomenal photos and videos. You really don't need to start with much. So it's not always a good idea to become a crazy gear hound and just spend oodles of money on all this stuff unless you really get the skill that you need to sort of get the most out of it. But in any case, if you're looking at starting with some higher grade stuff than your cell phone, my recommendation would be just an entry-level DSLR or mirrorless camera, probably DSLR, because those are still a lot cheaper, and they usually come with a really cheap kit lens that works just great. Getting that 360 GoPro or just a normal GoPro is invaluable. Those things are practically invincible, and they take really good footage that, like Chris and Jennifer mentioned, you set and forget. And then, of course, the most important chase gear that I have probably is an app on my phone called Radar Scope. There's a lot of good radar apps out there, but my favorite is called Radar Scope. It's $10 once and a lifetime of really valuable radar data that's really easy to sort of interface with and get what you need from. So highly recommend that as well. But definitely start with a cheap camera, start with a GoPro. Don't go too crazy. See what you get with your first couple chases, and then expand from there as you get skill.
Yeah, I would just back up what Sean said. I came into storm chasing as a DSLR user. I have a Canon 5D Mark something in a bag somewhere that I never use, barely use days, because my iPhone takes as good of pictures. I mean, not in all situations, obviously. If you put a DSLR on a tripod, and you can, one other thing, if you do that, is make sure you have the focus right. I've done that wrong more than once on a storm, but these days you get quite good enough, and I imagine it'll keep getting better from the iPhones, especially in low light, stuff like that. So I think, again, you can be a pretty successful chaser these days using an iPhone or an Android with, your radar scope or other radar program of choice.
Yeah, what Ian said, like, you know, from the, I guess, the selling footage side of things, because that's what I do a lot of, especially with you know, live storms media and stuff like that. We sell footage every day that's shot on iPhones. So I promise you, what everybody else has said about, you know, phones and stuff like that, it's got credence. If it's good video, or if it's a good storm, a cell phone can shoot great video that's newsworthy. How about that?
Great. Well, thank you all for your time and wonderful insight. I think we've answered plenty of questions between live here and on the chat. Thank you all for being so engaged with the audience here. And thank you to the audience for asking questions. We're glad to see some positive feedback. And again, one last plug to check out the article. This has been recorded, so you can go back and watch it and share it with your friends as well. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Gideon to close us out. So thanks again.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Amber. Thank you. And Ashton, Jennifer, Chris, Ian, and Sean, thank you all for taking the time and making the effort to show up today and making this webinar happen. It was fantastic. And like, I honestly had to set an alarm to make sure that I would be able to warn you guys about how much time we had left, because I was totally drawn in. So thank you for doing this for us. Audience, all webinars will indeed be available to Weatherband members at amsweatherband.org. If you have further questions or you want to talk about the webinar, members are welcome to discuss in the Weatherband Community Forum. And with that being said, I would just like to say again, once more, thank you to our moderators and panelists, and thank you, audience, for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you.